So welcome back everyone to a practical guide for NPSP users, our four-part series exploring the path to nonprofit cloud. And this is our final session today. So on behalf of myself and everyone here at Fíonta, I wanted to thank everyone for participating and for being so engaged in these sessions. They were really energizing, I think, for a lot of us. And we're very excited for folks to learn more about embarking on the path to NPC. So this is our final week today, and we're thinking about the future. And no surprise, a big focus among our clients and lots of folks in the Salesforce ecosystem and beyond is figuring out how to take advantage of AI. There's new technology and AI coming out every day, and Salesforce is certainly part of that push towards AI in the future. So I'll go ahead and start by introducing myself quickly for those of you who don't know me, and then we'll dive into all things AI. We'll talk about where things are currently in our current state, any experiments that folks have been doing with their teams in AI. We'll talk about AI in NPC and Agentforce and some ways to get started. And then we'll talk a little bit of time, towards the end of our presentation about managed services for organizations that are using Salesforce and how best to make sure that you're keeping your Salesforce org polished up and up to date once you take that move over into NPC and before and after that move. So I'm Arden Winter. I have spent 5 years partnering with associations and nonprofits. I run our managed services team here at Fíonta called Accent, and I provide strategic advisory services for associations and nonprofits. And I also am the lead of our artificial intelligence research and implementation arm here. I live in Baltimore. I just bought a beautiful 100-year-old house in Baltimore earlier this spring. And I live there with my boyfriend, Seth, and my cat, Momo, who you can see here. And you may see him pop up on screen during the presentation as well. So if you see his tail poking in on the camera, that's a standard part of calls with me. So I wanted to start by opening things up for some open discussion about how you all are currently using AI, or if this is something that you've explored, whether it's in Salesforce, out of Salesforce, using Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, or anything like that. And if you're not using AI, or if you've started dipping your toe in, any concerns that you have about AI implementation. So I'll open the floor up if anybody has any thoughts.
Please don't be shy. This is a safe space.
Maybe data security is a big concern with, these days with remote workforces. It's not like as system admins, we can always control network traffic the same way. So putting the right security controls into these SaaS products using AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And using AI can be, depending on the tool that you use, a way that opens up additional data security risks. Fortunately, in Salesforce, there's lots of controls around that, and also even in tools like ChatGPT and Claude, our AI copilot of choice. There's ways that you can both control the security of those tools and use them to kind of identify guardrails that would be helpful to put up in your system. But it's a very reasonable area of risk when you're thinking about potentially opening up your data to outside sources for things like model training. So it's a very important area to consider when you're researching new tools to use. Absolutely. Has anyone else started using anything like ChatGPT, Claude, any sort of LLM tools like that?
We started testing Copilot.
How are you finding it so far?
It's okay. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't answer. I came from an organization that was using Gemini. We were a Google Workspace shop, and sometimes when you ask these LLMs about their own products, it can be a little frustrating, where you're expecting them to kind of, if you're a system admin, have some good information. But I think our staff likes it for kind of the standard office work use, works well for that. So
Meeting scheduling, document revisions, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of great opportunities for kind of time savings with those sorts of tools to, you're not taking tasks away from staff. They still need to be involved. They're not automating themselves out of a job, which I know is a big concern for folks with AI, and understandably so. But you're making the day-to-day tasks that no one is particularly excited about a little easier and a little faster, which I think is a great use of this type of technology. And we've found some productive use cases. Again, I think a lot of these kind of staff augmentation tasks you can think of that are useful not just for nonprofits, but for anybody who is, doing office or corporate type work. But there are a lot of specific use cases that we find that can be especially helpful for nonprofits, like doing predictive modeling, looking at your donors or folks that you've received major gifts from, and trying to identify with a large modeling tool which of these major donors are most likely to donate again in the future, and what attribute about a donor makes them look like somebody who is likely to recur their donation and not likely. We find content generation is also a big area where you want to build a robust web presence, you want to be active on social media or on LinkedIn, sharing blogs and creating content that puts the work that your team is doing out there in front of the public. And getting that important work that you're doing translated to those different platforms or those different distribution paths can be difficult. So using AI to translate, say, the transcript of a session like this into a blog post or into something that can be shared on LinkedIn is a great way to shortcut doing all of the work to develop that content and then being able to share it across multiple avenues to get it in front of the most eyes who might be able to support your mission or your cause. And like I said, that staff aid functionality, not just in things like the Microsoft Suite, making it easier to do business admin tasks, follow up on emails, edit copy, and that sort of thing, but also for a tool that might be embedded in Salesforce, or something that can make it easier for staff to slice and dice data or to manage records or report on data, pull different analytics and look at things with a new set of eyes and a new lens in doing data analysis. And in all of these use cases, and basically in any use case where we're using an AI tool, the response that we're going to get is only as good as the prompts that you might use to generate those responses and the underlying data that we're using to generate something like a predictive model about donor recurrence. If our data is in a bad spot, then we won't be able to know for sure whether our models are going to be accurate. It's going to be hard for us to validate the accuracy of a model that was generated based on data that hasn't been refreshed in a long time or hasn't been well maintained. And similarly, if you are trying to use a tool like ChatGPT to extract information or to help, teach you a new skill or anything like that, the format of those questions, the way that we build those questions that we ask to the LLM, or prompt engineering as we might call it, is really the best way that we can guarantee that we're going to get good responses out of that model where we're asking these questions and we're trying to expand our knowledge or our capabilities. So there's lots of different ways that we find that AI can help, like I've mentioned. I think the biggest area that the tech is really there for us right now is time savings. And that is to say that we want to free up staff time to do tasks that require their human brain, because there's many things that AI is not currently capable of doing. And I think it's going to be a long time, if ever, that AI is going to be able to help us with the types of warm, compassionate problem solving that we need to keep in mind when we're solving problems for our constituents. But these routine admin tasks are things that AI is a great sort of intern that can help us with some of these, lower level tasks to save time in our day so that we can solve those big problems and further our mission as an organization. We can also find that AI helps us extend staff capabilities. Say we have a staff member who is like myself, who's very technical, who has a lot of expertise about the types of products that we might offer for our constituents in our communities, but might not be the best writer. And so can really generate the core of an idea, but needs help translating it into something that could be published online. Using AI to extend those staff capabilities can be really helpful so that person's contribution can be even higher to our organization without taking additional time from them. Like I mentioned too, when we're thinking about predictive modeling, AI can really help us get a new understanding of data by thinking more objectively about analyzing some of the information that we might have about our donors. There might be some attributes that we don't as humans pay attention to when we're looking at data, but it turns out might at least be correlated to somebody being more or less likely to donate, even if that attribute doesn't cause someone to want to donate more. But it could be something that could help us in sort of segmenting and targeting when we're looking at talking to our constituents. And there's also some pretty great use cases for helping change the tone of a certain written communication. So if we wanted to, take a plain text message about a new campaign that we have coming out and rewrite that message to be warmer or more personalized, maybe we want to do a more robust mail merge where instead of just merging in somebody's name, we're pulling in information about the long history that they have with our organization. We can use AI and generative writing tools to really ground that communication in information that we have in Salesforce already about this donor and make it feel like a really warmly crafted message, but without staff having to take the time to write these individual messages for every one of our donors for our new campaigns. But all that being said, there are some risks of using AI. And, I think that we've all likely in our personal lives, even if we haven't had that experience at work just yet, had frustrating experiences working with an AI tool that we maybe didn't even choose to use, right? That was presented to us when we tried to submit a case with, a company that we made an order from and we're waiting on a response and we just want to talk to a person and we're only presented the option to talk to an AI chatbot. Those experiences with that, we call it agentic AI, that chatbot that you might be talking to ask about your order with Amazon or wherever you might have placed an online order. That experience can already be something that we find is frustrating about AI, but there are other risks that we need to consider when we're thinking about implementing AI, whether it's Agentforce, Copilot, ChatGPT, whatever the tool may be. It's very possible to get inaccurate or untrue responses from AI. We often call those hallucinations, where it will fictionalize data because the goal of an AI and an LLM is to answer your questions. If you ask ChatGPT a question, its first goal is to provide you an answer. It maybe has a secondary goal of providing you an accurate answer, but it cares more about just being able to answer your question than it does about answering your question truthfully. So it might make up a response that seems right, that sounds like a response that could be a valid answer to that question, but it's not actually grounded in anything real. We also find that AI is a really unfortunately skilled tool at magnifying bias. If there are biasing attributes that we as humans know we wouldn't want to run analytics on because they carry weight that would be something that would be hard for us to evaluate in looking at our data, say there's confounding variables or variables that would add socioeconomic weighting into some of the data that we might look at our donors. But AI has no ability to remove those biasing attributes. It's not going to think about those biasing attributes in the way that you and I might when we look at that data. So it's really important to be deliberate in terms of how we approach our LLM or how we approach our modeling tool, and that we don't give it access to those sorts of biasing attributes, or that we really carefully review our outputs to make sure that we are removing those biasing attributes as much as possible. Like we talked about, like Prashant brought up, there can be some data vulnerability issues, especially when it comes to data from inputs and outputs into AI being used for training the model. What that means is a tool like ChatGPT, right, in this LLM, large language model, it has terabytes upon terabytes, huge amounts of data of all sorts of different exchanges between people, all sorts of different strings of text that it uses to try and figure out what the best answer to your question is going to be. And if we aren't careful about reviewing the privacy policies of tools that we might want to use, our data, including sometimes if we inputted PII or PHI about our donors, that data can sometimes go up into the model, and then someone could accidentally or on purpose send a query to ChatGPT that would return this information that I wouldn't have wanted to share externally. So that protection of our data and of our proprietary information is something that is also really important in AI tool selection. We always want to make sure that when implementing a tool, on a org-wide level, throughout our foundation or throughout our org, that we are not opening up all of our exchanges with a Copilot tool or with an LLM to be pulled into that model. And the other thing I think that is important to consider, especially when talking about these generative tools that might write text for you for emails or that might generate an image or a sound file, there are some populations that have a negative opinion of AI overall. And there is nothing that we could reasonably expect to do to convince them that we're using AI responsibly. there's some good reasons for folks to be against AI, and we wouldn't want to kind of force it on them. But if your donor base or if your constituent base happens to be primarily made up of these folks who have negative opinions about AI, rolling out an AI implementation that's kind of public facing, donor facing, might be something that impacts their reception of your organization. So that kind of sentiment analysis is something that I think is always important to consider, especially when we're trying to put something in front of our donors or in front of our fundraising pool directly. So how does some of this fit with Nonprofit Cloud, which is why we're here today, right? We're talking about our future in Salesforce, and that might include upgrading to Nonprofit Cloud, and Agentforce, which I imagine we've all heard about, but if we haven't, Agentforce is a Salesforce's AI tool suite. It includes some features for public-facing agentic AI. It includes some features for staff augmentation and staff assistance tools. And there is a big suite of features that have been released or are planned to be released that will enhance your experience in Nonprofit Cloud specifically. So Agentforce includes in Agentforce for nonprofits these purpose-built agents with pre-configured topics and actions that are built around the entire fundamental kind of NPC data model and processes that are built into NPC around programs, around grants, everything that NPC is built to do. They have built or are building these pre-built agents to work with that NPC model. So that means that we have, again, this agent, which is meant to be a bundle of different questions that somebody could ask or different things that somebody might need to do. So we might have an agent for programs, and it has different topics that are different kind of areas of expertise that we're expecting the agent to have, or different areas of questioning that we think someone might approach the agent with, and then different actions, which are different things that we're allowing the agent to do inside of Salesforce. Because what I think nobody wants is to turn on this agent that's supposed to help your foundation team, have an easier time reviewing inputs from folks that are looking for grant applications, right? And we turn on the agent and it's allowed to do a bunch of destructive things in the system. It gets access to delete contacts, and it gets access to do all of these things inside of Salesforce. When we have an agent that's built with this pre-configured set of actions, it can only do so many things, and it can only do things that we allow it access to do. In the same way that you can control user permissions by managing something like a profile or a permission set in Salesforce, you can really tightly monitor what the agent is allowed to do. And these agents for nonprofit inside of Agentforce are built to be allowed to do a constrained set of things with your NPC records. So with your contacts, your accounts, programs, grants, all that. And not only that, so we have this pre-configured little starter pack, you could say, of all of the basic things that you might think your agent needs to be able to do. It might need to be able to help you with generating reports. I might think that I want an agent that can generate an email as a thank you when someone has a gift opportunity that gets closed. And these might be things that are pre-built actions inside of Agentforce. So when you have this licensing for Agentforce for NPC, you can just turn on your agent and it has all these actions already that you can test out and see how they work with your data. But you can also build custom topics and actions so that when you have the specialized work that you do for your community and your constituents that's represented maybe with a custom object or with a custom process as somebody goes through your fundraising process, if you have a customized sales process on your opportunities, we can make custom topics and actions that can allow the agent to do anything within reason that we're comfortable with the agent doing inside of Salesforce. So you're given this starter pack of things that the agent is able to do, and you also have capabilities to, with skills that don't require development. They don't require someone to come in and code something for you. They're very similar to Salesforce Flow, or they're built using Salesforce Flow. If you're familiar with that inside of NPSP currently, we can customize what the agent is able to do and let the agent interact with lots of different things in your org, even if they're fully custom objects that nobody else has inside of Salesforce. There's also other types of generative AI where, this is more what we think of for something like a ChatGPT or a Claude, where I don't need the agent to go in and do things. I don't need it to close cases for me. I don't need it to update volunteer records, but I do want it to look at all of the closed won opportunities related to a contact, and I want to be able to generate an email to that contact that references all the different types of past donations they've had with us. We would call that just the generative AI to create that text. And we have a tool called Prompt Builder inside of Agentforce that lets us do that too. So if we don't want something to be going in and managing our records, we don't want an AI agent to be exposed to our donors in Experience Cloud and our portal, we still have some tools that we can use that are really powerful to extend our data and extend the ways that we can act on our data inside of Salesforce using Prompt Builder. So it can let us, like I said, kind of craft these warm emails that are grounded in our existing data instead of having to handcraft those emails or instead of having to generate a complex mail merge activity to send out to potential donors. So there are other ways, again, that AI can help that are different than some of this NPC-related direct Agentforce functionality that would be kind of bundled into this Agentforce for Nonprofits feature. One of those is that predictive analytics piece that I keep mentioning, where we can generate our own data modeling based on our personal data inside of Salesforce. This used to be called Einstein Studio Prediction Builder before Agentforce rolled out last year. It's now called Model Builder, and basically what we can do is I can say, I want to look at all of my closed won opportunities, and I want to identify the attributes that make an opportunity look like one that's most likely to go closed won versus closed loss. And I'll give Salesforce some examples that I say, this is not only my set of closed won opportunities that are closed, but it's the ones that are the most paramount to what we would consider a good opportunity for our association or our nonprofit. And the same for our lost opportunities. These are the ones that we really expected to lose. This was unsurprising that these were our lost opportunities. And then Salesforce with Model Builder will look at the rest of our open opportunities and say, these 5 opportunities maybe look the most like our closed won. These seem really well suited to target actively because we think that this person is really likely to close on this major gift that they're going to donate. And same with our opportunities that maybe look the worst. These are the ones that we might expect based on our modeling are really unlikely to donate kind of no matter what. So we can use this model builder to do a lot of more robust forecasting without needing to have necessarily somebody who's a really senior data analyst or somebody who's got a lot of forecasting experience. Salesforce kind of gave us the tools to help extend the capabilities of our staff without, like I said, needing to pull in that senior data analyst to do that type of modeling. The other tool that I think is really valuable both for folks in NPSP and in moving to Nonprofit Cloud is Agentforce for Employees, which the licensing costs for this are generally going to be the same, so you're not necessarily paying separately for having an agent for nonprofit and an agent for the employee side. But the reason I think that some of the features that Salesforce offers in Agentforce for Employees, as they call it, is really helpful is I know because this happened to me in a previous role, and I think it happens to a lot of us in the nonprofit space. We become accidental admins, right? You are the person who was the most interested or the most invested in moving to NPSP off of our legacy fundraising platform, or you were the person who was the admin of the legacy platform, and so you are forced to be the admin of our new platform, even though you don't have any experience with it, and you're learning it with the rest of the team. Or, right, you've been on NPSP for a long time and you're moving to NPC, and it seems like an intimidating thing to learn. There's a new data model, there's lots of new kind of functionality that we have access to, different things that we can extend with Flow. And it can be really intimidating to be in that seat of that accidental admin who has to go from knowing nothing or feeling like they know nothing to being an expert in order to lead the team into being successful in the platform. So Agentforce for Employees gives us lots of tools to do things like get help from Einstein to build a better flow, either to enhance a flow that you already have or to build a flow that does something that feels like that you want to solve a problem, but you're not quite sure how you can solve a problem with Flow. And it also can help with doing things like security review and audits and access audits to make sure that we know who's logging into our org from where and that we're controlling permissions appropriately to be good stewards of the data that we're holding on our donors. And for staff that aren't in that accidental admin seat, but are learning how to do their job, feeling like they need to learn how to do their job again from the beginning sometimes when we're in a new platform or moving into NPC, We can do things like ask Einstein Copilot, which is part of Agentforce. I need to look at all of my opportunities that are in a particular status, or I need to look at all of my contacts that are in this particular role on my opportunities. And maybe I don't know how to build a report that will get me that information, so I can ask Copilot, and I can both get it to help me do that data analysis kind of snapshot without needing to go and build a report. And I can also ask it, if I want a report on this topic, how would I build it? And Einstein can help us learn how to build these reports, build flows, and improve our org and kind of work together to better serve our team than we were able to before as we're moving into this new area of possibility with Nonprofit Cloud. So there are some practical steps to get started. I know that, it can feel very intimidating, especially because every tool seems to be releasing AI features. Salesforce is certainly not alone in being really excited about this new avenue of technology. And so it can feel a little bit like you're trying to drink out of a fire hose when you're thinking about implementing AI. So taking a slow, steady, and kind of deliberate approach, we've observed with the folks that we've worked with and with ourselves internally that taking that slow and steady crawl, walk, run approach to implementing AI is the best way to kind of maximize investment. A lot of tools that use AI are not free or they're not cheap. And, just picking up every tool that seems like it might be helpful for us can be expensive and time consuming. And it turns out you might not get the results that you'd expect. So we also recommend often piloting a tool, right? So having a couple of users testing out features to see if it's helpful for us in the work that we do before signing up everybody at the org for a tool like Copilot or ChatGPT, or before changing our strategy overall to use a different tool. It's also really important to make sure that we define some acceptable use policies or addendums to our IT security policies to include our use of AI. There might be tools that we aren't comfortable with using. Maybe we decide that nobody at our foundation is allowed to use ChatGPT. Everybody has to use Claude. So defining that in our acceptable use policies is valuable, and making sure that folks aren't signing up for tools and using them to do work that is not approved by us at a kind of enterprise level, you could say. Karen has just linked in the chat, and we're including the links too in this presentation after we send it out, for some blogs that might be helpful if you're looking at getting into this AI journey and you're trying to figure out how to get started. And of course, if you have any questions, you can always reach out. I'm sure that either other folks here on the cohort or us here at Fíonta would be happy to give some advice on where to get started with AI, whether it's in Agentforce inside of Salesforce as you're moving into NPC, or whether it's something entirely outside of Salesforce that you just want to use to help make your team's life a little bit easier in the day-to-day. So I'll open it up for another open discussion here as we move into talking a little bit about how we support our Salesforce org and how we support our use in Salesforce, whether it's, moving on for upcoming releases or moving into NPC or just doing our day-to-day management. So I'd love to hear how folks are currently supporting their org inside of Salesforce, how you're getting ready for upcoming releases. We have Winter 26 coming up in the next week or so, and what challenges you find you're facing in your day-to-day maintenance of Salesforce.
Do any of you engage with a vendor for ongoing managed services, or do you have an internal admin developer? Nope. Okay, we can keep going.
Sure. So managed services, and I promise I'm not here to talk about Fíonta's managed services specifically, but especially when you're looking at the migration into something new and large, like moving from NPSP to NPC, having some support of someone who is taking ownership of maintaining your Salesforce org, whether that's an internal person or an external partner for managed services, having someone who can help you both with that ongoing day-to-day support, right? Making sure that things are optimized and performing well, and we're not experiencing, big delays of things that our donors might be accessing, or our volunteers in our portal, making sure that we're working through enhancements that are asked for by folks who might not be an admin, but are looking to launch a new program, making sure that everyone is trained and feels like they have the knowledge required to use Salesforce effectively. and somebody to keep an eye out on upcoming releases or upcoming concerns about security risks, issues with connected apps like we saw recently, as well as, like I said, those new initiatives for someone who is kind of an expert in the platform to launch new programs and new features that might be exciting for the team. NPC is new for everybody, and anybody who's migrating into NPC is going to find that a new tool with its own new set of exciting features and training gaps that need to get addressed. And those Salesforce releases too come pretty quickly. And like I mentioned with the kind of accidental admin role, not every group has a big IT team who can handle cataloging release readiness requirements or updates that might be coming down the pipeline. When we invest in something like Salesforce, it's always good to be thinking about continuous improvement. So you're not just delivering what you are used to in the day-to-day from when you migrated from Razor's Edge into Salesforce, but that you're continuing to do more with the new technology that becomes available for you. So here at Fíonta, we try to make our support flexible and keep our consultants learning new knowledge about NPC, new Salesforce releases as they're coming out. And finding a managed services partner that works for you, that meets your team's needs, is, I think, the most important part of that process. So some folks might like our flexible support model, but some folks want something that's more programmatic or more structured. And there's lots of different ways that managed services can help meet those needs for you and meet your budget and your team's capacity. So finding the partner or the staff person internally who's going to help you keep up with the trends in Salesforce and make sure that your org is, fresh and meeting the needs of everybody on your team, that's the kind of key part of this process. Whether that is, like I said, a managed services partner who will support you ongoing, or whether that's hiring on an experienced admin, somebody who's got more experience or certification in NPC. There's lots of different ways to make sure that you are staying up to date with what's coming with Salesforce and what's coming with your team. Managed services is one of those options that can always be valuable to explore. So we're going to send some takeaways for you. One of those is the Nonprofit Cloud roadmap with Agentforce. We shared this earlier in our cohort, but we'll make it available again since we've kind of revisited some of these Agentforce topics. And we also have a 2-page PDF that we're going to send out for AI tools for nonprofits. And this is both Salesforce tools and non-Salesforce tools. It's mostly focused on kind of other tools that are outside of Salesforce and Agentforce. And Karen is dropping those for you in the chat as well now so that you have them if they're of interest to you or helpful as you're thinking about your AI journey. I'll pass it over to Karen.
Great. Thank you, Arden. Thank you, everyone, for spending time with us over the past 4 weeks. We super appreciate it. We hope you found it helpful, useful. And we want to be able to offer you a personal consultation. My dog is about to bark. In the upcoming weeks. So what we're suggesting is that you complete as much as possible in the systems and integration worksheet that we shared at the beginning of week 1 and week 2, and I'll put that in the chat in a moment. Send that to us here at Fíonta. I'll provide an email address for you, and then let's schedule time for a one-on-one review. Our team will spend time going through the worksheet, provide a brief analysis and a readiness scorecard for you. On that one-on-one call, we can dive deeper into demos. If we didn't have a chance to do a grant making demo, Rachel, I know that was important to your team. If there's anything you would like to go further into with case management, outcome, program, fundraising, that's a chance to have your individual questions asked. And then we'll talk about what a migration roadmap might look like for your organization. In week 2, if you remember, we had Mehmet from Cuneiform come, and we are happy to be able to offer not only, of course, their free option, but they have generously offered every attendee here the Pro product for 30 days. So that will allow you to run analysis on your existing data and have an audit ready so that when you do take the next step to migrating to Nonprofit Cloud, you've been able to do a lot of that data cleanup in NPSP before you start spending money with a partner like us or someone else. Let me put that in the chat. And then Arden, do you want to move over to Q&A?
Yeah, absolutely. So happy to discuss any kind of questions that folks might have about AI in general, about the Agentforce roadmap, how that fits into NPC, or any plans that folks have for their migration. I'd be happy to chat.
Um, what would you say are, I guess so far with implementations, what do you think the biggest challenges have been with different customers you've worked with?
Yeah, so I think that one of the biggest challenges that I've faced with Agentforce is not necessarily the features that are in place, but like I mentioned when we're talking about some of the actions that you build with an agent, we don't want to turn on an AI that can just kind of do stuff rampant that it thinks is going to solve a problem that a donor might flag if they're reaching out to us in the portal, or that staff might have when they're looking at somebody's journey through their like gift life cycle. Um, and in order to make sure that the agent can't do things that are outside of its scope, the actions that an agent is able to take are kind of pretty strictly pre-configured. We can give it lots of actions, but the way that I like to describe it is that you give your agent a toolbox, and it has in that toolbox only a very specific set of tools, but it might have tons of tools available to you. But trying to figure out how we turn, okay, what do we want the agent to be able to help people with? What problems are we trying to get it to solve, to that set of those constrained actions that the agent should have access to, can take a little bit of translating. And I think it can be helpful to start to think about before we try and start building something with Agentforce, like figure out what problems do you actually want an agent to be able to solve for you? Because it is not a magic wand. It can't magically make staff have 4 more free hours a day, or magically make it so that donors have a beautiful, easy experience with anything that they might need to interact with us online. So figuring out what problems you're trying to solve and then try to build something to solve those problems, I think that approach has been much more productive for us, rather than, starting to just throw some things together in the agent and then realize that it feels like we didn't give it enough actions, that it feels really constrained in what it's able to do. So that pre-thought process, I think, is a big lesson learned for us. And then the other piece that I recommend with every AI tool is testing, because like I mentioned, I at least have had this experience pretty constantly in the last year, where I go to try and interact with a company online that used to have live agents, like live humans that I could chat with, and now has an AI agent kind of chatbot. Those conversations can be really frustrating because it feels like nobody went through the process of asking a user how they would think to ask questions and the way that they would phrase certain questions. And so the agent doesn't understand because nobody tested it and confirmed that it could interact with somebody who talked about a problem the way that I or another common person off the street would talk about the problem. So really making sure that you do a lot of, ideally, end user kind of like focus group testing is another way to kind of bridge that frustration gap that can happen when we release agents publicly.
Gotcha. Um, that makes sense, and that's super helpful to consider going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, glad to hear it. And then I see Rachel has a question in the chat as well about, is Agentforce a paid add-on to NPC, or does it come with for free? Or is there a more limited free version that comes with NPC, but not the full version? So the answer to this question is somewhat complicated, and keep in mind, we don't work for Salesforce, so I don't know always exactly the minutia of the way that Salesforce does billing. But generally, Agentforce is a paid product, so there is some portion of a little bit of licensing that's required for certain users to like build agents. The agent itself needs a user if we're building that public-facing like agentic AI, like we were just talking about. And then Agentforce, it has a credit consumption pricing model. If anybody's talked to you about data cloud pricing and data cloud tokens or credits, the pricing for Agentforce conversations is kind of similar, where a complicated conversation with an agent that involves the agent doing lots of things or pulling in lots of data might consume more credits than a very simple question about, how many open opportunities do I have? So there is some cost involved generally, but Salesforce has this free SKU that I think is last I checked, included for a lot of our or all of our nonprofit clients, which is called Salesforce Foundations. And this does include that kind of like limited free version that you're talking about, where you can basically dip your toe in and kind of test the waters with a pool of those Agentforce credits. You can build an agent and see what it's able to do with the data that you have in Salesforce. And that Salesforce Foundation SKU is generally at no cost. So there is kind of this piloting program available. I am not sure about any other paid package or discounted features that are available as part of NPC, but I'm more than happy to follow up on that with our contacts at Salesforce and let you know the best way that you can kind of reach out to talk to them about pricing. It's not an easy pricing model, even for me to wrap my head around sometimes, and I do this a lot in my day-to-day. And it has changed somewhat over time, but I will follow up with you when I get some confirmation on if there is anything that's included as part of NPC or not.
Arden, thank you so much for sharing your expertise today. Hugely appreciated. Thank you all for attending, and we'll follow up by email with links to all of the takeaways and all of the blog posts, et cetera, that we have referenced. So thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.